Hey everybody, welcome to the Geek Reloading podcast. I'm your host Adam, and as always my co-host Josh.
Hello.
And this one, I think that we pretty consistently every once in a while go on like a reminiscing episode here and there, right? That's kind of become part of our MO.
Yeah, and I mean, it's fun. We've got a lot of memories, and, you know, it's always fun to share those.
Yeah, so this one specifically, it was just like me and Josh were talking one day after we were done recording, and we were talking about some retro consoles, and we were just talking about like some of the things that we remember. Because I think it was talking about emulation and how I was emulating using like a wireless Xbox controller, and I was able to jump in and out with save states and that kind of stuff. And I was talking about how wonky and how frustrating some things were back in the day when we were gaming, like as we were growing up, because gaming was still kind of coming into its own. And so there was a lot of interesting and also bad moves and some things that only happen if you grew up gaming with these kind of retro consoles.
Yeah, and so like I know I'm kind of coming from the 80s and early 90s for most of my gaming memories on these things. So that's kind of where we're talking about. And we're not also talking like necessarily like games or game types, but like more of just like all the stuff that kind of surrounded like gaming.
Yeah, like the experiences gaming with these different types of consoles, or things that like the kids that play these days, this is going to sound super old man, but like if they're playing a retro version on a Switch of a Nintendo game, they're not going to understand when you talk about certain things that you had to deal with while you played it when it was actually on Nintendo, you know?
Yeah, I mean, and also like they run smoother on these emulations now. Like,
oh yeah,
it's crazy. Like, yeah.
Anyway, so our title for this one was Adventures in Retro Gaming, and it's just kind of talking about just what it was like to play those kind of games and some of the interesting things that people around our age are going to be like, oh yeah, I remember that kind of sucked. And dude, the first one is like an easy one that if you talk about gaming before the last 7-8 years, that if you talk about gaming, people will know, and that's talking about corded controllers,
cables and just everywhere.
Exactly. Just like how frustrating it was.
Like, and I remember, like, you always had those kids, like, in your neighborhood that they had a rat's nest. Like, that was, like, the thing is they had the cables in just a big ball, and you had one or two, like, plugs where you'd plug it into the thing and then check which, controller it was.
Yeah, exactly. And it was always, like, in it, You'd be playing and the cables would get stepped on and the Nintendo would go flying across the room, or it would knock over your drink that was right next to the Nintendo or whatever.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, it's just the cables on consoles. It makes sense for the time. They didn't have wireless technology that was efficient, but I mean, it wasn't until Xbox really pioneered breakaway cables. So if they do get stepped on, then it actually splits rather than doing some damage to either your console or the controller or both.
Yeah, and that was really good. Xbox did that because they also were kind of the first ones that made those cables long, like super long. Like, the old 8-bit Nintendos, Super Nintendos, those cords were only like 4 or 5 feet long. They weren't that, you were sitting pretty close to that system.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about most people when they think about probably playing Nintendo, it was like you're sitting on the floor, your neck arched up uncomfortably because there's only 4 feet of cable or whatever. And the TV was all the way across the room from everything. So that was like your home base right there. That's what you had.
Yep.
Yeah. And also, and this was one that I brought up with it too. I mean, the fact that they didn't really think ergonomics when they first started making video game controllers, because who thought that a sharp, jagged rectangle was a good idea for the Nintendo Entertainment Console when it first came out?
Seriously, this was my first understanding of what a callus is. Those little corners in my palm. Like, I got these little weird bumps there, and I asked my dad about it, and he was like, oh, those are calluses. And then he showed me his hands, which he was a mechanic, so he had lots of calluses. And I was like, oh, that's so weird. What is it from? And then I went and I started playing my Nintendo, and I was like, oh, Oh, that's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
And then also concave buttons, like the ones that you'd build it, there was an indentation on it, and there was that sharp ridge. So if you ever had a game that you had to like move your thumbs around, you were just jacking up your thumb as well. Like, I mean, it was trial and error probably back then. They went, we just need 2 buttons and a directional pad, make something. And they're like, well, a rectangle works. You know, that might be where it started. But even on Sega and Super Nintendo, they're like, you know what, maybe we should round off these buttons so then the kids don't remove their like entire skin with every single time they hit those 4 buttons.
Oh yeah. I mean, I remember back in the like 8-bit, like there was a couple games where you kind of had to slide back between A and B. Yep. And you got some callus on your thumb for those things. That it was crazy that way.
Yeah. If you want to talk about like sketch solutions to that, there was a game called Track and Field, and it was all like Olympic stuff.
Yes.
And the entire point was you're supposed to mash down on the buttons, and then sometimes it was in between the 2 buttons or whatever. And so my solution was I would put the controller down on the table, and I would grab a battery, like a AA or a AAA, and I would just run it back and forth on that A button, and that's how I would get like max speed.
Yep.
It would be like, because I'm like, if I do that with my thumb, it's going to just tear my thumb up. I can't do that. I need something else.
I was the less smart version of you because I just did it with my thumb, like the side of the knuckle, and I had big calluses on there. I just was like, whatever. I just gotta press it a lot, and I did. I did the sliding back and forth, and oh man.
Yeah, I was a little bit forward thinking on that one, but when it came to the 64 and like Mario Party games, oh no, I had a callus in the middle of my hand, middle of the palm of my hand from like doing that rotation on that thumbstick.
Yep.
And it was just like a blister that popped, and then it just started callousing. So I mean, I had my moments of genius, and they were moments to say the least.
And really, like, if you're unaware, like, just look at the 8-bit Nintendo controllers. Like, you have the old one, which is the big rectangle, and then you have the one that with the top-loading Nintendo, and it was just ergonomical. Everything was different. You can see all these things that we said just between those 2 controllers on the same system. So
I mean, and you see like over time how much they started focusing on, oh, maybe we should make these functional and comfortable as well, you know? So I mean, it happened eventually.
Well, but also you have to think like the designers probably weren't expecting, you know, kids to sit down and play for 12, 15 hours a day on these systems. They might have just said, "Oh, well, this is comfortable enough for an hour." And that's really long. That would be way too much time to game. Little did they know.
Exactly. Okay, so what's another one, man?
So the next one is sleepovers with multiplayer games. Like you literally you set up these times where you got a new game and you're like, you got to come over and you just have to sleep over. Like it was like a weekend thing, and it was like the parents never heard from either of the kids out of their bedroom. It was like, do you want food? Yeah, they bring food in, but you'd have these kids just sitting in their room. Total absolute shut-ins, that's what it was. Like you get into these games and it was crazy.
Now, here's the thing. You keep on saying kids, but I did this with friends until I was like 20, 22. I mean, we had all night Halo nights with Halo 3, you know, back when we lived in a house with 2 guys who were huge gamers and 1 guy who lived in his room and we never saw. And like, but we had overnight ones plenty, and we had like a specific night. It was like every other Thursday night was Halo night, and that's when people would show up at my house and we would game until like 4. Like I had the day off the next day to be sure that I could game as long as we wanted to.
Oh yeah. I mean, so I got a couple roommates that were gamers just for this fact. I mean, I remember sitting and playing Halo 3 for as much time as I possibly could because those were the days.
I mean, it may not be sleepovers anymore. Luckily, with the online ability, you can still game all night with people. I mean, that's still one nice thing. It's just, but there is something different about everyone being in the same room, shit talking to somebody across the room and hearing their reply rather than over a headset. It's nice to be able to still do it in this day and age from anywhere in the world, but there was some sort of magic about sleepovers and like system link play and everything that was just really special.
Well, and it's very like retro, like the big LAN parties and shit like that. Like those were the days, you know. I remember with one of my old roommates, like we play a lot of Warcraft 3. They had a couple different games, and it was literally like we'd be sitting there like yelling back and forth like from room to room while we were playing on our computers. So absolutely, that was some fun stuff, like
for sure. Yeah. So this one, like, just it's still a thing, but it's not nearly as prevalent of a thing, and that's that AA batteries were used for everything. Everything.
So just nowadays, think of if you took every battery, lithium ion, all those weren't a thing. Those were AA batteries, and the thing was big enough to accommodate AA batteries instead of a nice sleek little lithium ion or, you know, any of those rechargeable batteries. Man.
Yeah. My biggest memory of this is just, like I said on one of the previous episodes, just that Game Boy. Like, I burned through AA batteries. I think it was AAA for the Game Boy Pocket, but I burned through batteries consistently so much that it like stressed me out because they were expensive when you were a kid. Like, and it was a whole different expense on top of getting games that I was like, I gotta like portion out my allowance to make sure that I can convince my mom to take me to the store to buy more damn AA batteries. Now, granted, Xbox still does AA batteries, and I roll my eyes at that. But
but there are some really good like rechargeable options out there. Like,
and I have a million rechargeables.
Yeah, and they're easy to, you know, go through that rather than just do AA batteries. You know what? Seriously, I remember, oh man, in high school, they opened up a Costco in our city, and I was so excited. I went and looked, and they had batteries. Like they had
Costco-sized batteries.
They had like the 48 pack of batteries, and it wasn't like $1 million. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. This is life-changing right here.
Yeah.
That was super cool for me.
Speaking of like old school stuff, man, we were cleaning out because we're like going through some of our storage boxes, and there were some that we didn't even open from when we moved to Bountiful. It was just in storage, right?
Yeah.
And dude, guess what we found? We found an entire 2 oversized Costco-sized spools of CDRs and DVD-Rs.
Wow. Like, and I realize I don't even have a disk drive on my computer anymore. So I'm like,
nor do I.
Yeah. Like it's just not a thing anymore.
Yeah. And Laura looked at me and she's like, can we use these? I'm like, for what? Like,
yeah,
what
exactly.
We can take them shooting, I guess, or something. But like, there's no need for that whatsoever anymore in our world. Like, I was like racking my brain. I'm like, do I make hard copies of anything? No, they're all on hard drives, and I have like backups of those hard drives.
You can't even access the hard copies. It's also funny that it's a hard copy that it is now on a disc.
Right?
That's crazy.
It's just so like, yeah, but I found those and I was like, wow, that's a throwback where like I bought those thinking I'm going to need a bunch of these for a long time. Yeah. And that is not the case.
I think I still have, oh man. And I just realized like my backups of like pictures and stuff are all on disk, and I need to find my old disk drive.
Yeah, you need to back that noise up. You know why? Because we lost a bunch of like family photos from when we first were married because the discs cracked under pressure and temperature when we were moving. And so like we lost those. They were gone. So everyone back up your shit. Back up your shit to the cloud. Yes. Do something. Okay.
No, real quick. Yeah. The AA batteries, like the worst thing for the AA batteries, Sega Nomad. It took 6 to fill the battery pack, and they lasted maybe 45 minutes, an hour. Like, not even joking.
I'm glad I never got that because I think I would have rage quit using it just for the fact that it was so ridiculously expensive.
I love that thing so much. It was such the coolest idea ever, but the batteries just made it Ugh, that was bad. Anyways.
It ruined it. Oh, yeah. Anyway, so, this next one, you and me have talked about it before with my R-Zone story, but just the Tiger games and the shitty knockoff games in general that were always like plaguing grocery store shelves and Kmarts and stuff of like real titles.
Oh, dude, like this is where, like, if you ever play Super Smash Brothers, like Mr. Game & Watch, this is like the thing. This is where he came from, is these little Tiger handheld, like, insane. I fucking love these ones. Like, when you brought this up, I had forgotten all about it, but like I had like an old Double Dragon.
Yep.
Oh, dude, that was the coolest thing ever at the time. You know,
because you didn't know any better, though. You didn't know any better.
Well, like, I still had a Nintendo at the time, so I could go home and play, but I could take my Double Dragon, and it was like, you know, the e-ink, the electron. Oh, it was terrible. It was so terrible.
And it didn't really make sense how to play it or anything. It was a garbage system, but everyone, I think, everyone around our age has owned at least one of those.
Oh, yeah. Because, I mean, they were no money. Like, it was $15 or something like that for that.
Yeah.
And you could play it off of 2 AA batteries for 1,000,000 years. Like,
that is the thing. They did last forever on those batteries.
Well, yeah, like they had barely any electronics in it. It was terrible.
Yeah. They were the exact opposite of your Nomad.
Did you ever hit the reset button and hold it for a little bit longer so it would show everything that it could show? Like
all of the graphic layout.
Graphics, quote unquote.
Yeah, I did.
Oh, dude, I love that because it was always like, oh, well, how do you get that thing? What is that thing? Like, yeah.
Yeah, but something that I was thinking about when I wrote that one, I'm like, what would be like a modern day comparison to the Tiger games? And I think that instead of not necessarily the shitty knockoffs of real titles, but I think the best comparison to the Tiger games of 2020 would be like all those games you see ads for on like Instagram, all those terrible ones that are like, you know, measuring water or cutting a rope or all that kind of crap. Yeah. I think that's the equivalent of shitty Tiger games from us growing up.
You know what? I can't even say that because it's like the shitty app games. Like you can buy 1,000,000 apps, and some of the apps are amazing, but like those Tiger games were amazing. Like they were. We weren't. Because we didn't know any better.
They were garbage. They were garbage and a half. It can't. All right, so we interrupt our regularly scheduled podcast because our wonderful friend Kade from Gaming Memories has decided to crash our podcast, and we just want him to come on because we're talking about cool shit that he's totally going to agree with.
I'm so happy you just crashed in.
We'll see. We'll see about that.
So, Kade, this episode that we only got a few little subjects in. We were talking about adventures in retro gaming. Specifically, we were talking about how just certain things that we did growing up through gaming is just something that doesn't happen anymore in this day and age, really. And so we've gone over like specifically talking about stuff like those shitty Tiger games that were everywhere in grocery stores and AA batteries for everything. And, you know, like sleepovers being the big thing for multiplayer games and like cables everywhere too short that always got stepped on, all that kind of crap. That's the stuff we've gone on about, but you're joining in pretty early on, so we can talk about these with you too, man. If you have any that we haven't listed, like you let us know, because I mean we're just kind of going, man, this is an awesome time to be a gamer, but back in the day there were some weird things that we kind of just went, this is fine, that's normal,
this is great.
But I think that, I don't know if it's weird. I do miss the ritual, like the whole ritual, start to finish, from A to Z, of going to a Blockbuster or a Hollywood to pick something out. Something about physically, like leaving your house, going. You have to walk around the whole place. There's no internet, so you're like, you go through and you pick like a couple sleeves. You got enough money for one game. You can't fuck that decision up. So you read the back of every sleeve. You read every word, multiplayer, like everything. You look at the screenshots. God damn it. Because for me, I would have to ride my bike, which was like a decent like 25, 30-minute ride, depending on which store I went to. And you can't go home and have made a bad pick because you saved up the money from doing chores to get the game. So it was a big deal. Like, it was an important decision, and I went through. That's where I learned how to maybe analyze things. And do
I was going to say,
job.
is this the beginning of your curation days? Is this the beginning?
Maybe. I mean, I just remember fondly now looking back. So there might be a little bit of rosy retrospective, a cognitive bias there, which is a real thing. But I remember fondly that whole process of walking around and just doing your due diligence and then making a decision. And almost the lack of information is what made it so fun and mysterious, because you never, you look at the back and you kind of knew what you're getting into, and maybe you had a Game Pro or an EGM or something, and you had read a little bit about a game, but it was like opening a Jack in the Box. You didn't really know what to expect.
You didn't know you hoped that you knew what you were getting, but you didn't know for sure what you were getting.
Well, and also you had the magic. It was like Christmas magic when you went to the store and you were like, oh my gosh, that game is out now? Like something you heard, a while ago. You didn't know it was coming out or when it was, but it was there at the store. You could buy this game. And, oh man, those were the days.
Okay, hang on 1 second though. Is it this can't just be me, but something about movie rental store smells. Like you walk in and it smells like a Blockbuster, man.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that was part of it. That's a good call, Kate. Because I mean, really, I remember, like you said, it was a certain tradition, ritual, a vibe. You're like, oh, we're going to Blockbuster. You're like, okay, so that means I'm going to browse the movies, go to new releases, check out the games. I'm going to get me some popcorn. Mm-hmm. I'm going to stand in line with a bunch of other people.
Get a freaking push pop. Don't forget those.
Yeah. So
and maybe if your parents were too busy looking at movies, you could sneak over and try to get a peek at some of the naughty movies without getting caught. I was trying to find the games. That's all. Oh, they're over there where you usually are. Okay, I'll just go over there. It's because you're a good boy.
I thought they moved.
You're a good boy.
Yeah. I was thinking of Hollywood Video.
I get it. Is this not where the game? Why do I have to walk through these beads to get to the games? Oh,
yes. I don't know. I'm holding
this is the 18 only area. Sorry, I didn't see the sign. I'll go back
you guys
out there.
Go to some of the movie stores that were in a basement? There was one in American Fork that I loved, and it was in this basement around this corner. It was so buried, but it was the game corner. I love that thing.
Without knowing what you're speaking of, it does sound like your fondest memory was a porn shop. It doesn't sound like anything else.
I wish at that time you go, ooh, exactly.
Well, you're just you're talking about some sketch ass basement and you're going through there to try and find your selections. I don't know, man. That seems a little bit off for me.
Hey, you know it. I wish. I would have got my ass kicked for that one. But yes. Well, and it was video games were about as special, as about accepted as porn at that time. So it was you kind of had to go into those sketchy places sometimes.
A little bit more.
That's actually, jokes aside, it's a good point. That's something I hadn't thought about till you brought it up. When I was now gaming is so prevalent, there's no, I don't know, there's not a ton of social consequence for being a gamer. Where when we were kids, there definitely was
Karens
some consequences.
play, video games on their phone. Everyone does.
It's much more common and kind of expected to be a normal thing rather than, oh, you play video games. I was on the tail end of that. I feel like I was a little lucky. Because, by the time I hit junior high, everybody was like, yo, are you playing a 64 or not? And I'm like, fuck yeah, I am. So, that's kind of where I was at. But, I get it. So
I was in the half, the middle. There's definitely, when I was really young, NES, Super Nintendo time, I was a little oh, this kid plays a lot of video games, and parents were skeptical about time in front of the TV, and there was a lot of, I don't know, stigma surrounding it. By the time you were in junior high, we were probably around the same age. Yeah, 64, it was more prevalent, but if you played Mario, that was cool.
Yeah.
If you were a Final Fantasy nerd, that wasn't cool. Yeah. Still wasn't cool.
It was definitely based on the genre.
Or if you had the friends, there were certain friends that it was cool to play certain games, but it wasn't other games.
That makes sense. So one that we were going to talk about, Cade, was that just arcades in general, not even just the arcade in the age of Corona, because that's like, but just the fact that arcades were just, they were gross ass places to go to, and you were playing games and you were shelling out like $10 at a time.
Gross. That was an immune system gym.
That is so true.
Yeah,
I do
for
remember
real.
like getting sick after going to one of the arcades in the mall, and I was just like, what the heck? And I realized that it's just nasty.
Yeah.
I would just put quarters in my mouth constantly, and I think that made me invincible because I don't ever
Yeah.
get sick.
That must have been it. There you go. Tips, everyone.
Yeah, if you want to talk about like aromas, like you can talk about the Blockbuster one fondly,
Definitely.
but arcades were just sweaty, gross, nasty smelling.
Yeah, the Blockbuster aroma wasn't
No.
bad. It was
was-
distinct. It was neutral, but you associated good feelings with it because you knew what it meant. Arcade, especially any Chuck
Oh,
E. Cheese's.
dude,
Chuck E.
Chuck E.
Cheese's were like, oh my god.
It was bad when you like went to one of the arcade boxes and like seriously, it was greasy, and it was a bad day.
Like you grab the joystick and your hand just slips right off of it.
Oh,
and you're
yeah.
like, oh, somebody was in the food court.
It was 9 times out of 10 that was the case.
Right. So, Josh, you mentioned this one specifically, like the era of the banana chair.
Dude, so like I remember like so well. I have this memory of my grandparents gave us an old console TV, and this thing was giant and it was so heavy. Like there was no way that I was gonna even be able to like scoot it across the floor when I was 8. But I remember them bringing it in, and I got to hook up my Nintendo and sitting on the floor maybe 3 feet from this giant TV, which was only like, what, maybe like 18, 19 inches
Yeah.
normal. And
But it was 75 inches deep.
exactly. But it was also like amazing because I've been playing on 11-inch like little tiny TV till then.
A
and it
black
was
and
like,
white.
Yeah, and just like sitting on the floor, and then it's like you sit there for long enough that like the best idea for a Christmas present, your parents get you a banana chair. And it's like the coolest thing ever because you're still sitting on the floor, but not like, oh, I love the budget.
But now your neck is
Yes,
dying.
exactly.
That's true. The neck thing, I think, overall. But also, everyone can admit that they rolled over their own fingers multiple times with a banana chair.
Oh, and the
100%.
brother always rolled over on your fingers as well.
Yeah. Or the
Oh,
brother or
dude.
whoever pisses you off, so you wait until their hands are close and you accidentally roll over them.
Yeah, accidentally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's,
Dude,
that's a sketch one right there.
I forgot all about that. I remember like for some reason like I liked rocking back and forth on my fingers, like just a little bit. Just like I don't know. That was
Just
weird.
a little bit, just so you can feel something for once.
Just to see how it feels. Just the tips. But
So, Kade mentioned this with the gigantic TV console ones, the ones that were like in cabinets and everything, like those wood finished ones.
yes, oh dude.
Josh had one of those, and I borrowed
had
it from
one.
him, and I legitimately mean it when I say it probably weighed 120 pounds. And he was like in the middle of moving or something, and he let me borrow it so I could have 2 different systems set up to 2 different TVs. And that thing was ungodly heavy. It was scary how awkward it was to try and move that thing into my house.
Is that the one you had at the skunk house?
That was one of those. That was a rear projection one that I got from a girlfriend's stepbrother's ex something. But no, this
And
thing
I
was
got
like the
that
classic.
TV from you.
Yeah, Josh took that one when I retired it. But no, this was like it was like the old ones that like are wood built around, and it's like a CRT, like those big heavy
I know what you're
motherfuckers.
talking
Yeah,
about.
Josh gave me. It was like a 27-inch, and the thing itself was like 5 feet long. It was ridiculous.
Oh man, that thing was so nice. I love that thing.
Yeah. And now,
I do remember vaguely the ones that had like the wood finish that were the big, and the like the corners were
Yep.
kind of rounded.
Yep.
Yeah,
man.
I know what you're talking about.
so
Dude,
this is
I
one.
had one that it was this giant wood console TV, but it had this lip around the edge, and it was literally like it was perfect to lift from. So it's like anytime we had to move it anywhere, it was like actually nice to hold and lift. I love that thing.
I'm just glad they stopped trying to make TVs into furniture. Just give me a big ass
Yeah.
screen and don't pretend like, oh, this is a talking piece when people come over for drinks or some bullshit. Fuck that noise.
Exactly.
So I've talked to Josh about this, but Kade, I think that everybody, when they're growing up, they find that one spot where like it's where they can game and it's the least interruptions. And when you're younger, it's harder to find a good spot that's not going to be like interrupted by people walking in and out, people stepping on your cables, whatever. Mine was like, I bought specifically for my room a 7-inch mini black and white TV. I had it set up with 2 different game systems, and pretty much from like elementary school till early junior high, nobody bothered me. And I had all the time in the world to play. And so finding that perfect spot where you could game, that was like really important in my brain growing up.
Yeah, I had a spot like that. Probably 12, we moved, and I went from having a bedroom kind of on the same floor as my parents to a bedroom smaller, but it was in the basement. Oh, yeah. And it was like quiet, it was isolated, and I got speaking of old TV, is a 13-inch TV. It was called the GX TV. I don't know if you guys are familiar. TV. Look this up. This was like marketed as like the extreme 90s gamer, edgy, jinkos and chains, GX TV. The front was a cover of speakers, and you opened the speakers up, and there was like wings of speakers on the side of the TV. Oh my God,
I'm looking at it right now.
TV was a subwoofer. It was a really shitty subwoofer, but
I remember I had a friend that had one of these, and it was like he was the elite gamer, just like that. It was the coolest thing ever. He had
it looks like a PA system.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, it was loud as fuck. It was awesome, and it was only 13 inches, but like you were saying at the time,
that was huge.
That was huge. Yeah, I had no problems with that, and it would sit either at the end of my bed or on like a drawer, a desk drawer, and I got it right at that time, that magic time, like 11 or 12 to 18, where you have 5-6 years. Yeah, like I said, you're made of free time. You have all the free time in the world.
Oh my gosh!
And I put miles on that TV, miles and miles on that TV.
For all things considered, that is a fucking bomb TV for the 90s. Like that would have been like a jealousy maker, man. That one is beautiful.
It was freaking awesome to watch my friend have.
Okay, so this one, it's kind of like a combination, but like something that I don't know how Josh can still be into it, like chiptune stuff too much or whatever, but like the old school 8-bit music and sound effects, that like shrill, high pitch, really bad sound effects, and just like the graphics that I struggle with older graphics a lot of the time, but more than that, just when I go back and play games on emulation, some of the music and the choices, especially on some of the sketchier titles, is really rough to get through. That's something that it's weird to think about now, because not everyone has like full on digital orchestra pieces that they've created in some sort of music app, right? But back in the day, that was just all we had. That's all the space there was on the cartridge.
But another thing, to connect back to the Tiger games, like those little beeps and clicks almost, like that was a memory right there. Those little sounds coming from those tiny little speakers were ridiculous. But I mean, it was just back in the day. Like that's what it was. And you had these games that's when, I think it wasn't till like maybe PlayStation and Xbox where music like started to really pick up in these. I don't know. Super Nintendo was pretty good. Like I remember getting some major feels coming from like Super Metroid, the music from that.
Yeah. I mean, well, I was actually going to talk about Kade in this podcast because Kade with his with RoboClip stuff, he's incorporated some of the most iconic little clips from video games. Like, I mean, you could hear like Ryu's Hadouken and stuff like that in some of his music. So Kade is kind of a person who is pretty good to talk about this with. Because Kade, you found some iconic moments that you built into some of your music, didn't you?
Yes. Technically, I didn't. Legally speaking, I didn't sample them. I recreated them to sound like the originals. None of my music that's been officially released that can be streamed would ever have an uncleared sample.
Never, ever.
No.
But they
should
the memories.
Should I do that?
They invoke those memories.
Yeah.
So I have a friend, I won't say just because I don't want to get him in trouble, but he does a lot of official stuff, paid remixes, and he works for game devs,
cool.
and he's released some music, and when he puts a sample in. Sometimes, like especially Square Enix. Square Enix actually, I'm surprised that I haven't gotten anything from Square Enix because they actually police stuff pretty well. But I hide my stuff really, really well. My music is really subtle. It's like Easter eggs. But they came after him for a sound that he used, and they were like, "This is a sound from Final Fantasy, whatever." And he had to give them video of his workstation. Like of him, like saying, "No, I actually just recreated this with synthesizers to sound like something."
He had to
Square Enix
show his
game.
process to show that he hadn't.
He had to show his process, but the funny thing is, so there's a synth. There's a bunch of different synths that you can use an audio signal as like the source instead of an oscillator. And so he actually did just sample the song, but he put it in the synth and then showed video of
Look,
it's
I made
in the
this.
synth. Like I made it out of this.
It's completely legit.
And it totally works.
That's crazy.
If you want to get around some shit, that's the way you can do it. But as far as iconic sounds, when you were talking about chiptune, I think a lot of people remember chiptune fondly because they remember the really good arrangements and then the sound. And you're right though, there was a lot of music that wasn't good. You just sort of forget about that stuff and you remember the iconic stuff, the Zelda theme, the Mario theme. That shit sounds good in chiptune. But there was a lot of music that didn't sound great. Like I've been replaying a lot of NES games, and sometimes you're right. Like the soundtrack, just stop. Like it's just hurting my ears. Or the sound effects just constantly over and over again. And as a kid, I don't remember it ever bothering me as a kid, but I have had moments where I've gone back and played an older game and the sound did start to grate on me over time, and I wouldn't have ever thought that was going to be the case.
Yeah,
when I was
one
young.
of them specifically that I remember is that for some reason, whenever it's like a monster, a dragon, a dinosaur, something like that on 8-bit, it was always this shrill, just growling whatever that just like blew out your speaker or your headphones. And I don't know why they couldn't ever figure out a better way to create a roar, but anytime you had a roar of some sort, they were just like, I don't know what it is, and they just smashed all the keys on the keyboard and they're like, that's the noise, that's what it's going to be. I never understood that.
Well, also you have like freaking Pokemon was terrible. Like,
oh yeah,
like the growls of each Pokemon were all different, and they all just were grating,
and they all sucked.
Yes, every one of them. And
so
you've played too long when you could recognize the growl for each Pokemon. Oh,
I still have some of them memorized, and it's sad, and they're all bad.
I probably could recognize a couple.
Dude,
not
I will say this, but like think about like when you hit like PlayStation era, and when it was like you actually had music to connect into those games, and like like rock music, like freaking Twisted Metal, like Wipeout, like XL, like those
Tony Hawk.
Like
ooh. Yeah, I was gonna say Tony Hawk and Wipeout were the two. Wipeout was the first time I heard European electronic music, and I was like, well, okay. It started getting me. It was like the first seed, and Tony Hawk was the first time I remember just like songs that I heard on the radio were in the game.
It was.
Now that was like
crazy.
Whoa,
it was so weird because it like I really liked Prodigy's Firestarter, and that was in Wipeout, and I was just like, I loved that game, and I put it on replay while I was playing that game all the time, and I loved it. Man, I love that shit.
Yeah, when music got better, like I think you're right. Super Nintendo, you started getting some amazing arrangements, even in that style and everything. But then when PlayStation,
Donkey Kong Country on the Super Nintendo,
beautiful. I'm still listening to like some of the like redos of some of those music, like the
remixes and rearrangements
like
and stuff.
The water level in Donkey Kong Country. Oh, it's beautiful.
Oh, so good. There's I would actually speaking of NES, two of the top, if I had to, it kind of oscillates depending on my mood and my day, but Donkey Kong Country and Chrono Trigger are probably in the top 5 video game soundtracks for me pretty consistently, and they're both SNES games. So that's 2 out of the top 5.
That's crazy.
Dude, that is awesome.
Chrono Trigger does have such an amazing set. I love the soundtrack of Chrono Trigger.
Might be my number one. Soundtrack.
I believe it. Okay, so Something else that we were talking about a while ago was cheat codes with Game Genie. Like that specifically, like when that came out, that was something else for a lot of people. Like I feel like I always felt fucking robbed because I would never be able to afford a Game Genie. But the people that could, like Kade was saying, you know, like when you're growing up, you have that one guy whose parents bought him everything. You're like, well, I'm going to be friends with you specifically so we can play video games together.
Dude, you don't know you don't know the pain of having a Game Genie and losing the booklet with it. Oh, dude, man, like seriously, like I would misplace the booklet once in a while, and I would just be like, I would be freaking the fuck out about it. I hated that so bad. And then like, if you didn't have like a Nintendo Power at the time and all that, like you weren't getting any new games. It was like what was in that booklet, and that was it. Like it was
that's crazy. Man. Yeah, I remember playing with a buddy, and he threw his Game Genie on his Sega, and I was like, what does that do? And he explained it to me because I had never seen it before, and I'm like, wait, so you just have all the cheat codes to everything? And he's like, pretty much. And my mind was blown. I don't know why, but for some reason my little brain couldn't help. I'm like, wait, so you're telling me the game recognizes that you have this power and it's not like going to turn off? And he's like, yeah, totally. I'm like, you're fucking with me. Well, hang on a second. What happens with like, I don't know why, but my dumbass brain could not comprehend. And then he's like, dude, it's just a cheat book. It's a cheat book, but it's like a game that you can do it for any game that I own. And I'm like, well, fuck you then. Like, I don't know how hard you're trying anymore.
How did those even work? Like, how did Game Genies even work?
Pretty much it rewrote code as it went through from the game to the system. It was fucking insane. Man, I got to the point where my Nintendo was getting old enough that I had to put the Game Genie on whether I wanted to use it or not, because it wasn't recognizing some of the games that I was using. Because those pins were terrible.
Yeah,
but apparently, like the Game Genie could also like damage your slot though too, like on the NES and on the Sega. If you used it too much, it would damage it. Apparently,
yeah, like, and a lot of people would actually be a lot more careful inserting the games. Like before, like, you know, a lot of us just like press the, you know, the cartridge up and down, wiggled it and all that shit to get it to work. Like a lot of people would be a lot more careful with the Game Genie. So it actually worked more often. And I think that was my problem.
Interesting. So the next one, we were going to talk about legendary stories of glitches, hacks, and Easter eggs. Now, that's primarily because back when we were growing up, the internet wasn't a thing yet, really. And so, like, you just had to hear on the playground or in between, you know, like classes at the lockers of things that you could do in games. The one that I thought of immediately was the Tomb Raider trick where you can possibly get her naked. I can't remember what the actual trick was, but what was it that everyone said you had to do to get that to happen?
I don't remember I just remember there being lots of different theories. This kind of goes into the next one with the urban legends. So they're sort of similar. Like, I remember hearing rumors that it was possible if you knew the ways of the dark arts, you could get her topless. And I also heard another rumor similarly with Orchid from Killer Instinct on the Nintendo 64.
Really?
That there was a way where there was apparently a way, because she's in that like green zip up and she's just freaking stacked. There's a way you could like get her apparently to face the camera and flash the camera.
No,
there was also rumors about Duke Nukem 3D where you know those strippers.
You
but they
can
had
do that one. That one's real. I know for sure. I think. I'm pretty sure.
Could you get the tassels off though? That's what was the rumor.
Yeah, you can
give them money and they flash you and they have. You can give them money and they'll flash you, but they have nipple tassels. The rumor was you could do a code and you could get rid of the nipple tassels. I don't know if that was true.
I think there is, because it was a PC game.
The urban legends around this, that's like, those are the things, because you couldn't verify it all the time. Like, and it was always you had a friend that had a cousin that told him how to do it.
Yes.
And he couldn't do it.
They had an older brother.
Exactly. It was exactly like that. And it's like, you didn't know anyone that actually did a lot of these things, but you know they know someone that did. Like,
yeah,
man,
it was never firsthand knowledge.
Yeah, dude, my cousin said this. Like, you got to do it this way. Have you done it? Well, no, but.
Okay, actually, there's a funny story in that. A mutual friend of Kade and mine's, Brian. He actually, I went to junior high with him, and he was playing Pokemon the same time I was playing it again. And he was like, "Dude, I know how to get like unlimited rare candies and get missing no."
Oh,
yeah,
that's real.
And I know how to get all three of the starters and stuff. And I'm like, "Well, can you get it on my Game Boy?" And he's like, "Yeah, dude, I can totally do it." And he spent the entire day trying to get it for me. Like, we had 3 classes in a row together, and he was like, "Dude, I couldn't get it to work." And I'm like, "Well, try again." He's like, "All right." And he just sat in the back, and he's like, "Dude, I don't know why it's not working. Maybe it's because you have a Game Boy Pocket." I'm like, "Dude, just try again." He's like, "I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I did it once. I can show you on my game." I'm like, "Well, show me on your game." "Well, it's at home." I'm like, "You know what, man? Did you ever actually get it?" I don't know if you ever did. He did eventually show me that he did, but he had all the ways. But he's the only person with like firsthand knowledge that I think I ever met with any of these legendary urban legends of games.
I definitely, the rare candy one I did. But the problem with the rare candy trick, it was like a duplication trick where you had to like swim to this little island and then swim back, like move something in your inventory, then it would duplicate it, and you do it over and over and over again. But when you used rare candies to level up your Pokemon, you don't get as much like, what's the word? Not rewards, but like your stats don't increase as much. Like, every time you. So it's like your Pokemon, and even though they're level 99, they're less powerful than they were if they were, quote, a natural level 99. That was how they. But it didn't matter because you just get fucking Mewtwo and then rare candy him, and even though he wasn't the true level 99 Mewtwo, he's still level 99 Mewtwo, and you would just one shot everybody.
Yeah, it's just there were so many supposed like stories, glitches, hacks. Like, wasn't there one with Street Fighter 2 where you could get a couple special characters instead of M. Bison at the end, but only one of them was actually true?
I think there is a truth to that one. Oh,
who's the Ryu
right.
Ken, the variant with the black outfit and the red eyes and the red hair?
Oh,
Akuma was one of them that was a legend, but he wasn't actually available, was he?
He wasn't until later.
Akuma made his debut in Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo as a secret character and hidden boss.
Interesting.
So,
yeah. There were so many, like, especially around I think the Super Nintendo era was especially when like people were like, I heard from a friend, if you do this, then you unlock a completely different cave in like Legend of Zelda, or you unlock this area in Final Fantasy. And like, that's when it was before the internet was actually capable, and but it was just enough that you could still have this kind of hearsay conversation in a day-to-day environment.
Yeah. I remember thinking back about it. I remember about the Tomb Raider. I had a friend of a friend that was like, "Yeah, you have to do this." Like, it was a crazy.
You had to jump in the pool, I think, was what it was. You had to jump in the pool a certain way. I don't know.
Yeah, and he's like, if you do it, like she's completely naked, and he was explaining how like when you're swimming, it's got the weirdest view, and he's like, yeah, and she's completely naked. I'm like, there's no way that they've made this game that way. Like,
yeah.
But
this is another one from junior high when we were talking about like codes and unlocking shit. There was a website. It was called Happy Puppy, I think. And it was just all about cheat codes, walkthroughs, and everything back in the early days of the internet. And I was trying to convey this information to some friends in junior high. And I was like, yeah, it's called Happy Panda. And go on there and jump in and you can get all these different things. My buddy went to it in front of his mom on the internet. And apparently it was an Asian women's porn site.
whoa!
So he shows up to weight training the next day and he's like, fuck you, Adam. I'm grounded for a month because of you.
Oh shit!
And I was like, dude, there's no way you're grounded for a fucking password cheat code website. He's like, it's not. It's a porn site for Asian women. And I'm like, what? No, it's not. He's like, yeah, Happy Panda. I'm like, I said Happy Puppy. And we argued for like an hour. And then I realized I totally told him the wrong site and I sent him to a porn site by accident. So yeah.
What a good friend you are.
The Wild West of the internet back in the late 90s. Oh my God.
Seriously,
okay.
like
We forgot like the most famous legend that was not true. in my opinion, like the most famous urban legend is that you can save Aerith. From Final Fantasy VII.
Oh.
Which, who knows how many poor young souls wasted so much time trying to figure out how to make that happen. A way.
And then that got revived with the remake, because the remake, they were saying that they were going to have an additional DLC option. And then like the creators were like, that's dumb. That's not going to happen. But that didn't happen until after there was weeks and weeks of speculation that there was going to be a DLC to save Aerith.
Seriously, I played through 7. I loved it. And I played it a lot. And then it was months after I had finished it. And then one of my buddy was like, yeah, did you save Aerith? And I was like, you can't. Like, oh man, that
don't you dare do that to me.
That haunted me for a while.
Oh man, that's a good point, Kade. I always forget about the PlayStation ones, man.
I mean, what was interesting, like you made a good comment earlier that the internet wasn't capable yet. So even though the internet was around when 7 had been out, and there was like early foundations of what would become like standard game media and things that are common now. There was, but it was like there wasn't a great search engine. Finding like cool shit on the internet about video games was impossible. The story with your friend was, I accidentally ran across porn a handful of times. Even
I may have written down the address.
Accidentally.
And maybe I bookmarked it, and my dad saw the bookmark later and took the computer away. But I initially found it by accident because I was looking for video game stuff. In fact, one of the first things I remember typing in on a search engine was video games. I actually remember being like, well, I'm going to see what this brings up for video games.
For sure. Like the very first time I got into chat rooms for the first time, I was like, I need to find a place to talk about video games. Like that was kind of like one of the first things I wanted to find.
Oh, thinking about one of the urban legends your gameplay of Symphony of the Night on your Instagram, Kade, like got me remembering it. Like I remember going to this, it was like a game store in the mall, but like the guy at the counter, like we started talking, and I'd been playing it, and he was the one that told me, oh, well, have you completed 200% of that game? And I was like, you can do more than 100%? That makes no sense. But then I actually told him, I was like, yeah, and I beat it later on. I told him, yeah, I beat it as Richter. And he was like, what? Like, he didn't know that you could actually play that. And he thought that was an urban legend for the longest time. But yeah, you could actually replay the game as Richter.
Can't you play it as Maria as well on the new one?
On the Sega Saturn, you could. And
that was so much cooler.
I think the re-release on PS4, Castlevania Requiem, might have it too. But initially, it was a Sega Saturn exclusive.
So if you get the remaster on mobile, you can choose and to play through any of those 3 at the beginning without having to beat the game.
Oh, that's cool.
Nice.
I just remember like being so stoked about finding that you could actually play it, because I think I remember seeing it in like GamePro or something, like a picture of him playing, and I was like, yeah, that's just the beginning, but he was in a different area in the castle, and I was like, wait a minute, what the hell? Like, I thought it was this big urban legend that they were teasing, but no, you actually had to beat the game though.
Right? That's so crazy.
I fucking love that game.
All right, so that concludes our like adventures in retro gaming episode. Dude, Kade, I'm so glad you came in, man.
Yes, this is so much more fun.
We still owe Kade a Gaming Memories podcast because Josh is a wealth of knowledge on gaming memories. I was on there and I had a great time. And if you guys want to have a listen to an amazing podcast, check out Kade. And Kade constantly is posting awesome clips on Instagram and stuff as well as what he's playing. He's got a crazy, amazing setup with a ridiculous amount of RGB lighting behind him.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive.
Maybe a little bit.
It's a lot, but I'm only saying that because I'm jealous. That's all.
Yep.
But yeah.
Yeah, the new awesomeness is there's this program called Philips Hue Sync. So if you get a Philips Hue bridge and any Philips bridge compatible lights, you can sync your computer to the bridge, which means now all my lights in my room match what's happening on my screen.
Oh my God.
And you can say where the lights are in relation to the screen. And the first game that I played with this new setup was Cyberpunk, which is the perfect game to play because that whole game is like neon lights.
That would be epic.
And so you turn everything off, and the whole room is like tuned to what's happening on the screen, and it sucks you into the screen.
Shit.
And it, because like out of the corner of your eyes, the ambient lighting is the same as the ambient lighting of what you're playing,
Dude.
And so it makes you. It's game changer.
That
dude.
is the
Game
first
changer.
time I've heard that, like, the ambient lighting like that sounds fucking awesome. Holy shit.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of different programs that can do it, but I went with Philips Hue Sync just because it's like it also works with a bunch of other stuff, so it leaves me open for more options. But it's just, like, if you have a PC. So the problem is if you're playing on a console, it's not available as a console app yet. I'm sure they'll come out with it. But on PC or Mac, you just download this little app, connect it to your bridge, and then you just say, look at my screen for directions on what to do with the lights. It's pretty plug and play. And I'll have to send you guys a video. It's dope.
Shit, yeah.
Nice. Well, yeah. So I'm even more jealous now. Okay. Well, so Philips Hue, Philips Bridge.
Just come over. Now that you're in Utah, just come hang.
Utah Valley, man. Once everything slows down, man, we're gonna get together. We're gonna do another episode for you, and we're gonna just hang out, and we're gonna do another super fight episode because that was one of the best ones we've had with you, man.
That was super
good.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that's our episode. We hope you guys liked it. Kade, thank you again for jumping in. That was awesome of you. Yeah.
No worries.
And all of our info is at the end stinger. And yeah, we'll talk to you next time.
Boy.
Adios.
Geek Reloading Podcast with Adam and Josh. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Have a question? Email us at geekreloading@gmail.com. Theme song titled Rocket by Kevin MacLeod. You can rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast on your preferred podcast service.